I recently bought 4 cameras. In this video, we're going to talk a little bit about what those 4 cameras were, why I bought them, and why I'm only keeping one of them. Maybe not even one of them. We'll see. So, as I'll discuss in another video, I have a severe case of gas. And if you guys don't know what gas is in the photography world, that means gear acquisition syndrome, which means I tend to buy a lot of gear. I tend to sell a lot of gear. I tend to experiment with a lot of gear. I end up having a lot of gear laying around. So I definitely have a severe case of gas, and sometimes for good reasons, sometimes just because I have the itch to get something new. Maybe that also is somewhat leans into also being a hobbyist as opposed to a professional, where professionals might have a little stricter parameters around when and why they buy additional gear. But we'll save the hobbyist versus pro discussion for another video. And I'll get into a lot more detail about my gas in future videos. In particular, I think I'm going to do one about all the cameras I've ever owned. So stay tuned for that as well. But the 4 cameras that I recently purchased, that were new to me at least, funny enough, none of them were actually new cameras. So let me tell you a little bit about which cameras I bought, and then what the rationale was behind that, as well as, I'm joking about rationale because literally I can rationale anything, especially when you have gas, right? You can pretty much rationalize any purchase that you make. That's probably about anything in life, really. But so the 4 cameras that I purchased, the first one was the Canon 6D. This is the first version of the 6D, not the 6D2. And I'll tell you a funny story about how I ended up getting to this camera. But I also bought a Canon 5D as well, which you don't see here, so that might give you a clue as to which cameras have already been cut from the mix. I also bought a Nikon D700, one of my all-time favorite cameras, and we'll talk a little bit more about that. And I also bought a Fujifilm X100. And just going to refer to my notes here real quick. It was actually the X100T. Because as you probably know, if you're a Fuji user or a camera person, you may know that the X100 is a very popular series, and there has been multiple models of that camera since the time of its release. So I had actually purchased the X100T. So let's start off talking a little bit about some of the patterns here. You might notice right away that all of these cameras are relatively old when it comes to technology. You know, of course, camera companies tend to come out with new cameras every year. A lot of times there's no reason to upgrade to those cameras every year. And a lot of times there's no reason why the previous cameras are no longer good cameras. And that's the case with these particular cameras and the other ones that I purchased and have since sold, is that they're still phenomenal cameras. They're still phenomenal at the specific things they do, and they're still phenomenal at capturing great images, which is what really this gear is really all about, right? Is the images that we create, the moments that we capture, and the specific use case that we need in order to be able to do those things. So one of the reasons that I decided to go with purchasing a couple of digital SLRs is because I had been using mirrorless cameras for quite a while, several years now. And while mirrorless cameras have a lot of benefits to them, having that kind of what you see is what you get in the viewfinder, having the latest and greatest autofocus systems, having a lot of other features built into them, including shutterless, high shutter speeds that you can get with electronic shutters. There's still some downsides, and just kind of the user experience sometimes is not as enjoyable as the old digital SLRs. In particular, mirrorless cameras, especially the older ones, where you got a lot of blackout when you looked through the viewfinder. So it wasn't like that always on kind of experience, as well as just, again, that user experience of being able to put it up to your eye and instantly see what you see in the world through the viewfinder. Plus, a lot of these old full-frame cameras had very, very large viewfinders as well. And a lot of the smaller, especially the Fujifilm system, a lot of their viewfinders are very, very small, even though you still get a lot of detail in that tiny little screen inside of your viewer, inside the view box there. But a lot of these cameras have very, very large optics in there so that you can see very clearly the subject that you're working with and trying to capture. So that's another benefit. So, so after shooting with those for a little while, I just wanted to change up the experience a little bit, try something a little bit different, go back to my roots, if you will, with the digital SLRs. We'll talk about film and going further back in the roots. I've done that many times, and about to grab a film camera for a shoot this weekend. But specifically these cameras, a couple reasons I want to give you as to why these cameras in particular. First of all, these are both cameras in their ecosystems, the Canon and the Nikon, as well as the Fuji and the other Canon I purchased, that are kind of iconic in those brands. And what I mean by iconic is not only did they sell a lot of units, but they also have some tremendous feature sets, take phenomenal photos, are really renowned for the image quality, the colors, other aspects of how they capture images and what the end results look like. And I had previously experienced that actually with the Nikon D700, where I had previously purchased this camera, loved the colors so much, got kind of drawn away by more megapixels and or the weight of this thing. It's a very hefty camera, but in some ways not much lighter than my newly acquired Z8, or much heavier, I should say, in this case. But they take phenomenal photos. So that's another reason that I wanted to go back and try some of these again and put them into the mix. As far as the Canons, one of the reasons I purchased the Canon cameras is because I've never really shot with Canon before. I believe at some point in the past I had a hand-me-down Canon PowerShot that my dad had that I might have shot a little bit with. I don't think I've ever shot with a Canon for film photography, but I definitely have never shot with a Canon for digital. And I had heard a lot of great things about them. Not only the scroll wheel on the back that's very, very popular and kind of iconic in the way that you're able to view images and access functions, which is something that's really not on a lot of other camera systems. But the color science too, and how people kept telling me that Canon's colors are unbelievable right out of camera. They're so much better than Nikon's. They're definitely better than Sony. They might not be as good as Fuji, but man, they're awesome right out of camera. And I just wanted to see that for myself and experience that for myself. So that's one of the other reasons I bought the Canons as well. And then in some ways, maybe it's a little bit nostalgic, but I feel like some of these cameras that are just sitting on shelves somewhere, either sitting in a camera bag at home, they're sitting on a shelf at a camera store with no one buying them and using them. Maybe in some small way, I was rescuing these cameras from the pits of camera hell, or whatever you want to talk, landfill basically, right? That these cameras could get some new life, get some new use. And again, as we talked about, they might not get a lot of use for me going forward, just based on experience with them, but also just having too much gear and needing to invest in the next round of gear, of course. So hopefully someone else that adopts these cameras will end up saving them and having long-term use out of them as well. The fourth reason I went with these particular cameras and why I purchased these cameras was because they're incredibly cheap. Especially when you look at the value of the quality of the cameras that they are, not only the build quality, but also the quality of the images they produce, compared to the cost of them, it's kind of astounding, actually. You know, when we look at current cameras, you know, I just bought, as some of you might have seen in another video, I just bought a Nikon Z8, and that was like a $3,000 plus camera, body only, no lenses. In comparison, the Canon 5D that I bought cost me $198. It cost me another $190 for a 50mm lens, which is actually what's on this camera right now. I bought this camera, the 6D, for $413 for a full frame, still fully functional, amazing camera. $400 for a full frame camera? Really? It's unbelievable. And then I bought the Nikon D700, which I think is a bit older than the Canon, but for $365. And another $223 for a 50mm lens. So all in for the Nikon system, I just don't have the lens on it right now, but all in was around $550 for a kit that I could take out and start shooting with right away. I did buy some extra batteries for both. I have to get some memory cards because they don't use the same style of memory cards that I have in other cameras. But it was pretty much, as soon as I got it, I started shooting with it, kind of functionality. The nice thing with both of these cameras is that they also were relatively low mileage cameras. The Canon, it's a little bit harder because it's very hard to get the information as to how many shots have been taken on a Canon camera. I don't know why that's the case, but it typically is. But the body appeared to be in really, really mint condition. And actually, when I've got it in my hand, after having bought it used, it absolutely is in really, really mint condition. Looks like it's almost never been touched or used. So hopefully that'll be a bonus when I go to sell it here in a little bit. The Nikon also, I can't remember the exact shutter count when I bought this, but it was under 15,000 shots that had been taken on this Nikon D700. So that's what I looked for when I previously got a Nikon D700. But also on this one in particular, it was very low mileage. So when you look at the price of it, the quality of it, the images it produces, and then also how little use it had received, it was a steal, I thought. And lastly, the Fuji X100T, that cost me around $720. I believe I purchased that off of eBay, if I remember correctly, which was a pretty good deal. Again, it was in very good condition, but the X100s, even though it's a crop sensor and a small fixed lens camera compared to these full frame cameras, I would argue these take far superior photos than that camera does. But the X100 series has a cult-like following, and that is definitely evident, and a lot of times in the prices as you start to look at the cost of those cameras on the secondary market. So I rearranged the table here a little bit just so I can look to my notes a little bit more easily and talk a little bit more about these cameras more specifically. I started off by purchasing the Canon 5D. Again, iconic, first in a series, game-changing camera for the marketplace. I watched a lot of videos about that camera, hearing people talk about how iconic it was and special it was. And ever since the 5D, the color science has changed in Canon and it's no longer the same. And they wish they'd go back to what they did back in the 5D. So I thought, man, that's the camera to get. I also was very intrigued by having the first camera in the series. The 5D has a 12.7 megapixel sensor in it, 3 frames per second. Released back in 2005, so as of today, a 20-year-old camera. I just wanted to see if it could still compete and hang with cameras of the modern era. That's another big reason I got it. As I mentioned earlier, I paired that camera with a 50mm f1.4 prime lens. I think a prime lens, if you're trying out a system for the first time, is a great way to experiment, as well as the 50mm prime is kind of a do a little bit of everything kind of lens, as well as having that f1.4 also allows to really kind of see how the camera shines as well. So unfortunately, after buying the 5D, I only got to use it for a very short period of time. So here's what happened. I actually took it on a photo shoot. I was working with a model. We were on location. She's a Canon. She's also a photographer, and she's a Canon user. So I was very excited about her seeing that I had a Canon and was experimenting with it and see what kind of results we could get together with that camera. And about 50 shots in, somewhere around that range, all of a sudden the screen went black. And I'm like, how can the viewfinder go black? It's not mirrorless. It's not like the battery died. It's a digital SLR, so you're going to see through that. You should see through that viewfinder all the time. So I'm like, what's going on with this camera? Turn it off, turn it back on, put the battery in, take the battery back out, trying to figure out what's going on. And I start hearing this rattling inside the camera. I take the lens off the camera and something falls to the ground. I look what falls to the ground, and it was actually the mirror mechanism inside the camera. It completely fell out of the camera. I don't know if it was just barely holding on in there and I just didn't notice it when I purchased it. I don't know if it was something that, it definitely wasn't something that happened from me banging or dropping it or anything during the shoot itself. So we didn't get a whole lot of use out of it before I went back to grabbing the Fuji and continued our photo shoot together. I did do some inquiries as to how much it would cost to repair that camera. And frankly, for how little I paid for it, what I could sell it for parts, and the time of shipping it, waiting for it to come back. There's only a couple places that I could find that I could even do the repair. Didn't seem like something I could probably do myself, but basically the camera was no longer functional, and I didn't want to go through all that rigmarole. So basically sold that camera not too long after I got it, and I believe I got somewhere around $150, $175 for it as is needing repairs on eBay. So not bad, recouped some of my money back, learned a lesson maybe, and moved on to the next thing. So I feel like I didn't really get a true user experience with the Canon, so I ended up purchasing the 6D, and that was partially by going back to that same model, and I said, hey, what Canon camera do you use? She does portrait work, she does work with children in particular, family photos, and she loves Canon, and she said that she uses the 6D, and she absolutely loves it, thinks it's light years ahead of where the 5D was. So for those reasons, and of course I went back on YouTube and watched more videos to see whether to get the 6D or the 6D2. The 6D seemed like a great option to further explore Canon and what Canon had to offer. So for those that don't remember, the Canon 6D was actually released in 2012, so I jumped forward almost a decade in technology, autofocus system, etc. But the Canon 6D also has a 20 megapixel camera, which is a really nice sweet spot, I think. And I wish more cameras, I guess there's a lot of cameras that have a 24 megapixel-ish, but going from like 12, 10, 12, somewhere in that range, which is usable in a lot of cases, but still to have that extra little factor of crop, as well as just have some extra latitude, and being able to go just that a little bit bigger if you want to in prints. I think 20 megapixels is a great sweet spot. And this camera was released in 2012, as I said, so a little bit newer. So I'm not going to go through an in-depth on all the shooting experience with this camera and a full review of it, but I will say it was a very enjoyable experience. The grip on this thing is phenomenal. It's got a nice little groove in here. It's got a nice depth to it. The look and the feel of it's fantastic. I think one of these you'll notice right away on some of these older digital SLRs is none of them have flip screens, which you think you can probably work around and it won't be that big of a deal, but then after using it over a period of time, like, man, I really do miss having the ability to do waist level shooting or to get down low and not have to lay on the ground to do so. Or if you're using it for video, being able to have that flip out screen, which I don't really like anyway. But ergonomically, functionality-wise, where all the buttons are sitting and laying, all the different options for customization, fantastic on this camera. I will say that being that I was a Fuji user, dabbled with Nikon, trying to get some muscle memory in a short period of time with the Canon was very difficult. Trying to realize where the buttons were for back button autofocus, using the wheel to adjust things versus there's no back dial on this camera, for example. I'm so used to a back dial, being able to have a front and a back dial. Technically, this camera doesn't have a front dial either because it's not in the front, it's on the top. So it kind of sits up here, which is kind of a natural place for it to be versus having to try to crank up to the front. But at the same time, it's, again, muscle memory from other cameras where they place theirs. It was kind of odd. So I did one shoot with this. It was actually with a model from Florida. And I'll post a couple of those images here embedded in the video. They came out fantastic. I love the images, love the color. We just did natural light, and so I didn't want to buy flash units and transmitters and stuff specific for Canon. But the images were gorgeous. The bokeh on it with this lens was fantastic. I could definitely see the appeal of Canon. I can say now I've shot Canon, but at the same time, this camera will definitely not be staying in my kit bag and hanging around. I think one of the things to realize when you have gas is that while it's nice to have cameras that you use on rare occasions, that's also money sitting on a shelf. It's also taking up space. You also have to then manage, like, okay, where's the batteries for that? Where's the chargers for that? And where's all the extra accessories and all the stuff you need? And it can be a little overwhelming. And again, for what purpose? So especially with investing more in the Nikon Z system, this camera is going to be sold very soon. I should be able to get some pretty good money for it because, again, I think the condition of it's fantastic and the lens is fantastic, fast, and just has great image quality coming out of it. So this one will definitely be sold. Moving on to the Fujifilm X100T. I've wanted a Fujifilm X100T since probably they first came out, and that might be partially because of some of the hype around that camera and just the overall idea of having a pocketable, small, take it with me every day kind of camera. And so I bought the X100T because I don't remember which model. It was probably the V that was out at the time that I bought the T. And it was probably very easy. It would have been probably better, I should say, to have bought the newest model of the camera, but it was also probably 4 times the cost, at least 3 times the cost of what, and you can't get it. Very hard to find, especially the newest model, the X100 series. It's still very hard to find. I didn't want to have to go through that, so I just went through and found a used version just to see if I liked the form factor, if I liked the shooting experience with it, if I liked the fact that the viewfinder is off to the side versus dead center, which I'm pretty used to. So that was going to be a whole new experience for me. And if I was just going to like the images coming out of it. So I think at the time that I started to kind of outline this talk, this conversation, the X100V was going for around $1,500 to $1,800, so about double the cost of what I got the X100T for. So the X100T actually came out in 2014, so that's about a 10-year-old camera. And then after the T, there was the X100S, and I think it went, I'm sorry, the S was before the T. It was S, T, F, V. Is V the newest one? I can't even keep track. But you can see how camera companies are constantly updating their series of cameras to get you to buy the next latest, greatest gear with frankly not that many changes, especially in the X100 line. So I'm not going to go into all the specifics about the X100T, especially since I don't have one here to hold and show you. But I will just summarize by saying that I had the X100T for about a month. I did about 2 or 3 photo walks with it, and then I really found that I was doing one of 2 things. I was either really struggling to functionality-wise with the buttons and the way it was laid out to have it be an enjoyable shooting experience, or I was getting frustrated with not having a tilt screen so I could do more waist level, or the shooting experience was also kind of so similar to what I could just do with my cell phone and more convenient just to do with my cell phone that I just said, well, why don't I just use my cell phone? So the X100T, while a great camera, a lot of great features, a lot of people love it, the super small viewfinder on it, the lack of a tilt screen, the way the buttons are so small and kind of hard to find just blindly unless you're using it a lot and get really, really good muscle memory were all challenges for me. The results were great. The photos were nice. I used bracket shooting a lot on it. I did a lot of black and white shooting with it. Again, I'm sure I've already in this video embedded several photos that I took with it. But again, a camera that especially with how hot the X100 market is, was very easy to sell for pretty much the exact same price of what I bought it for, and it was a pretty easy decision. So the last camera in the mix we'll talk very briefly about is the Nikon D700. As I mentioned earlier, this is probably my favorite camera of all time. And I absolutely love the images that come out of this. That has a sensor in it that you only use for a short window of time with only a few cameras that Nikon produced. I think it has magic pixie dust in it, that's the way I would describe it. I think the images are absolutely gorgeous. The weight is not horrible, but it is a beast of a camera. And I honestly think this is a camera that is historic and I should always keep in my collection. But I'm not sure if I'm going to or not, because again, I have other gear that I want to get, specifically a 500mm lens to take to Yellowstone here in a couple of weeks. But it's going to be really hard to not say, let's just hang on to this one for a little bit longer, sell off the other, the Canon. I'm probably going to sell my Fujifilm X-T3 as well. So I'm going to do another full video on this camera because I think it's worth going a little bit deeper into this camera, some of the functionality of it, some of the specifics and specific specs of it, and again, some of the magic that I think there is behind this camera. So kind of a long video, But I just wanted to talk a little bit about these 4 cameras, what my thought process was in purchasing those 4 cameras, why I decided to go with some older cameras, then newer technology. Encourage you to also think about some of the older technology you can either get at your local camera store on a used shelf. You can get for somebody like KEH. No, I'm not sponsored by KEH yet, but you know, or you can pick up on eBay. And some really fantastic cameras still out there. Don't think that you have to, in order to get into the full frames, into a full frame system, or in order to, you know, up your game in camera gear, or just to have a really nice camera that can last you a really long time, that you have to go out and get the latest and greatest gear. That you have to go out and spend $3,000, $4,000, $5,000 for a top of the line camera now that may or may not be suited to what your specific needs are, and might be a little bit overkill for your needs. So with that, I'll leave it there, but I am going to do another deep dive video, so stay tuned for that, and maybe there's a link right up here somewhere for that. So a lot more content coming. Appreciate your following and listening. Appreciate the subscription. Appreciate your comments on what is your favorite camera. What is a camera that you could never sell? What's a camera that you're thinking about buying that's a little bit more of older technology? And feel free to leave that down in the comments. I'd love to hear from you. Have a great day.